Assalamu alaykum, hürmetli kırındaşlar, ata-analar, dostlar, ufkusanlar, suyumluk balalar, şunaqla barlıq akademiyanın barlıq əzaları, yaxşımısılar. Həmmіңlarning mush vaqti xeyirlik bo'lsin. Men Amérika Uyghur akadémiyisining Fayzullah deydim. Bugun biz to'g'ri orqali o'zining o'tir maktab hayotini a'lo natija bilan, ya'ni 50 yil a'lo natija bilan bitirib dunyodan oldin ko'rinib turadigan universitetlarda o'qiyotgan, ham birisi yangidan o'qish bitigan ikki qizimizning o'z og'zidan o'zining o'rganish tajribalari, o'z hayotidagi xushalliq minutlar va jafoliq minutlar haqida va bizning shu yangidan, ya'ni o'tir maktab, to'g'risida o'tir maktab to'liq o'tirdi o'qiyotgan bolalar uchun shularga nisbatan qandaq ularning tavsiyalari bor, qatorliqlarni anglash va ular bilan fikr almashtirish uchun biz bu yerga to'plab o'tiribdik. Undaqdan shu bugun shunga ishtirok qilgan barliq do'stlar, o'quvchilarningki ehtimol hozir nurg'un qalbisida nurg'un savollar bo'lishi mumkin. Bugun men mundaq savollarga javob topaman deb kelgan bo'lishi mumkin. Hamda shundan ilgari men shunday bir faoliyatni o'tkazishning zarurati bormi degan haqida azroq bir to'xtalib o'tgim kelib qoldi. Bizningki shu yig'ilishlar nima uchun o'tkazildi? Buning bir ahamiyati bormi? Buni biz nima uchun bu akademiya o'rlashtirib qoldik degan vaqtda hamda shu necha yildan buyanqi, ya'ni Amerikada yashayotgan ota-onalarningki o'rtaq bir endişesi var. Yani şu ballarım yaxshiroq maktablarga o'talarmi? Yaxshiroq maktabga o'tib qolsa, buning iqtisodiy ahvolini qanday qilamiz? Yoki bo'lmasa nurg'un ishlarni qanday qilamiz deydigan bir savollar bor. Anadan keyin bu balları o'tir maktab, to'liq o'tir maktablarda o'qiyotgan vaqtida hozirgi ota-onalarningki ularga ko'plab yordam berish ehtimoli kichik. Nima qilganda bizlar men o'zimni aytsam, biz Amerikaning ma'rif sistemasini bilib ketmaymiz. Biz yaşımız bir yerligi bağında ankin bir yer kelgan. Hammamiz maktablarni, oliy maktablarni boshqa davlatlarda o'qigan. Shunga biz o'zimizning bolalarga qarata bir maktablar, ularning maktablarda o'qiyotgan vaqtida bir yordam beramiz desak, biz chiqib beramaymiz. Endi biz buni yordam beramaganligimiz biz qanday qilyapmiz ota-onalar deganda, faqat o'tir maktablar yaxshi bo'lgan, ya'ni to'liq o'tirish yaxshi bo'lgan joylardan uyilish deganga o'xshash. Yani şu ballarını qo'shimcha bir maktablar, kash kurslarga berish degandek bir shakllar bilan azroq bo'lsin yordam bo'lar. Maktab yaxshi bo'lsa, ehtimol ballalarim yaxshi o'qiydi degan planlarni qilyapmiz. Amaliyotda bundaq qilishning zarurati bormi deganda bundaq emas ekan. Ya'ni maktab, o'tir maktablar, to'liq o'tirlar Amerikadagi dangliq to'liq o'tirib bo'lmasimi, agarda shu bolalarning o'qish usuli to'g'ri bo'lsa, shunday maktablardan bu dangliq oliy maktablarga o'quvchilar chiqib boralayotganda. Bugun uning ustiga hozir ham uchur davri bizningki shu burungi ajdodlarimizdan qolgan bir maqol tamsildimi, bilgi cho'ng birni yengar, bilimi cho'ng mingni deydigan gap bor. Biz ham hozir chet ellarda o'zimizni tiklash uchun bu o'qimasak bo'lmaydi. Hamda cho'nglar allaqachon maktablarni boshqa yerda o'qib bo'lgan, ham bizning umidimiz hozirgi bizning bolalarimiz ikkinchi generation, uchinchi generationlarda. Bulardan cho'qim advokatlar çıkış gerek, ixtisos egalari çıkış gerek, bankerlar çıkış gerek. Anandan keyin senatorlar çıkış gerek, kongressmenlar çıkış gerek, hukumatning nurg'un tarmoqlariga singib kirish kerak. Shunday bo'lgan vaqtida biz o'zimizning uyg'urlik oltini dunyoda saqlab qola olamiz. Biz uyg'urligimizni naqsh usul yoki ancha bu yerda bir faoliyat o'tkazib qo'yish bilan saqlab qolishimiz tez. Hem dünyadaki başkalarga bildirishimiz tez. Shuning uchun biz shunday o'zini aytib yaxshi o'qib, hozirgi dangliq oliy maktabda o'qiyotgan shu ikki farzandimizni bu yerga chaqirish orqali bular qandaq o'rgandi? Bularning o'rganish tajribalarining qaysi taraflarini hozir bizning bolalarimiz o'rganishga tegishli ekan? Qaysi tarafini davomlashtirishimiz kerak ekan? Qandaq qilganda odatdagi normal maktablardanmi yuqori top universitetlarga bağlı bo'ladigan degandek mazmunlarni aydınlashtirish, shundaqla ko'pchilikninki hozir beshni bo'lgan nurg'un savollarga javob topish uchun biz bu yerga yig'ilib o'tirdik. Bugungi bu faoliyatni singlimiz Hayrinsa riyosatchilik qiladi, faoliyatga riyosatchilik qiladi. Xayriniso o'zi Boston turdi, o'zi pul muomala kasbidan masterlikni olgan. Hozir bir advokatma
iqtisodiy taftish bo'lib ishlayaptimi?
iqtisod taftish bo'lib ishlayotdi. Bugun shu faoliyatimizningki butun jarayoni inglizcha bo'ladigan bo'lg'achqa Xayrinsoni shu faoliyatga riyosatchilik qilishga taklif qilaman. Xayrinso.
Rahmat. Shu gaplarni Fayzullakom dedi. Endi men qisqacha deb qilsam, men uyg'ur so'zlar nargiza Nigara siz uyg'urchani qilib yaxshi so'zlay olasiz. Uyg'urcha gap qilsam tushunasiz. Shunga men uyg'ur riyosatchilikni uyg'urcha qilaversam, agar men tarjima qiladigan yerlar bo'lsa, ondan tarjima qilsam, chunki ikkalaylar yaxshi tushunadi uyg'urchani. Ondan men tarjima qiladigan yerlar bo'lsa, shunga yordamlasam deb o'yladim. Ondan amsa boshlab ketsak, shu avval Gulenay, Nigare chiqqanlarni vaqtlarini chaqirib bugun biz bilan o'zinglarning maktabdan iltimos qilish jarayoni, bu jarayon ko'rsatgan tirishchanliginglar, ham o'rganish usullaringlarni biz bilan o'rtoqlashishga shunday qimmatli vaqtlarni chiqarganlarga ko'p rahmat. Bugun ota-onalar, xilichi ota-onalar bor, bir-biridan o'moq bolalar qatnashibdi, hammaylar shu qiziqib sizlarningki hozirgi maktabga qandaq o'tganliginglar degandek chiqishlarga. Shunga rahmat sizlarga bir qitim. Amsa avval bugun planimizda avval Gulenay, andan Nigara 20 minutdan yarım soatga so'zlasa o'zi biz chunki bularga biz ota-onalar bilmoqchi bo'lgan bolalar qiziqadigan temalarni bergandik. So'zlasa undan keyin savol javob shaklida yana bir bo'lak qilsak, ondan siz savolinglar bo'lsa, siz turib ovozinglarni eshitib o'zinglar so'rasanglar bo'ldi, ular so'zlab bo'lgandan keyin. Ya bo'lmasa menda inkas shaklida qoldirib qo'ysanglar, men sal turib shu savollarni birdan-birin o'qib, ondan keyin bu shikaylandan savolinglarga javob olamiz. Shu amsi boshlab kelsak.
Xayrinso, shu ekran oldida nurg'un o'rta maktab bolalarim borki, ular uyg'urchani to'g'ri yaxshi tushunib ketmaydi. Mush bayatdan gapimizda inglizcha kichkina xulosalaytamiz.
Bo'ldi.
Tanıştırıp sözlüğüne.
Ma'qul. So today we have two guests. Gulenay was admitted to Harvard in 2015, and Nigara was admitted to MIT in 2018, if I remember it right. So today they are here to share their experience to apply top universities like Harvard and MIT. So they are gonna share their process and the process and the materials they prepare. So how did they get into Harvard and MIT? So our plan is today is like Gulenay will speak about 20 to half an hour, and Nigara will have 20 minutes to half an hour to speak about their experience. And then after that, we will have a Q&A session. So you can unmute yourself to ask your questions, or you can just leave a chat here. So I will ask your question on your behalf. So we will get answers for your questions. So that's the plan. Now we are gonna start with Gulenay. So can you please start, give a brief introduction of yourself and
Hammalarga salam. Desetten. Keçmişte benimki Uygurcam anca yaxşı emas. Şuna ma session in English qilishga nisb qilgan. So I'm going to start in English, if that's okay. So I got a few questions I'm going to go through. Just to introduce myself first. So like Xayrinso said, I was admitted to Harvard. I got an early action in December of 2015. So that was the December of my senior year of high school. I was born and raised in Virginia. I went to public school here, so nothing too, notable about I didn't go to private school, prep school, nothing like that, just public school here in Virginia. I graduated from Harvard in May, so it's been now 2 months, and I'm starting medical school in 3 days, inshallah. So that's where I'm going from here. In terms of when I was in middle school and high school, I was very, very busy in high school. I was very involved in athletics and extracurriculars outside of my very intense course load. Middle school was probably like the last time I didn't really have much going on at that time. It was more just focusing on my studies so that I could prepare well for high school. So mostly like the high impact, high yield part of my education before going to college was in high school. In terms of managing my time when I was in middle and high school, I think the most important thing is to keep yourself busy and to keep yourself accountable, like hold yourself accountable. So like I said, I was involved in a lot of activities and clubs and things like that. And I knew that I had to be very careful with how I spent my time. So grades are the most important thing when you're in school, and everything else comes secondary to that, but everything else is also important. So taking care of yourself while also maintaining a busy schedule was sort of the way that I found worked best for me in terms of managing my time. So I knew that, okay, I get out of class at 2 o'clock and I have, 4 or 5 hours worth of club meetings, and then I have to go to, track practice. I was on the track team, and then I come home, make dinner with my family, spend time with them, and I didn't have time to do homework until like 9 p.m. And then you stay up late, and it's the whole thing over and over again. But I was never, discouraged by that. It's kind of, you face up to the challenge because you know it's going to pay off in the long run. So invest your time wisely, and maintaining a busy schedule, I think, is the best way to like keep your mind focused on what you're doing immediately and helping you plan your time for the future. What's just really quickly, so what schools I went to in Virginia. I went to Kent Gardens Elementary School. It was a French immersion program, so I started studying French from first grade. So I've been studying French my entire life. I went to Longfellow Middle School, and then I went to McLean High School. So in Virginia, they have like specialty high schools, like preparatory academies, or like magnet schools, where it's like the entire curriculum is primarily focused on science and technology. And a lot of people go to those schools hoping that it'll help them get into college. I didn't get into any of those schools. I never attended any of those schools, and I think things worked out fine. So just make the best of the situation that you're in. There's no reason to stress about, oh, I didn't, my parents aren't paying tuition for me to go to high school, I'm not going to do well. That's not true at all. It's all about working hard in your own setting and doing the best that you can wherever you are. And with that being said, like in my high school, we had the AP program, and not all schools have that. Some schools have the IB, the International Baccalaureate program, and some schools don't have any advanced curriculum at all. So I would say, like, based on whatever high school you go into, take advantage of whatever resources you have there. So if they offer the AP classes, take the AP classes, as many as you can. Do the IB program if you can. Whatever is challenging for you in that setting, take advantage of it. And another question I got was my parents' role in my early education and sort of how they were helpful. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to go into medicine. That was sort of always the thing I knew I wanted to do. My parents were concerned because they knew that, it takes a lot of training to go into medicine, and they had never applied to school here, so they don't know that system at all, right? So they're like, I can't help you. Even if you need help, we have no role in that. So it was kind of like I was navigating everything in the dark, basically. So I didn't really have any idea what was going on. But I had a goal that I wanted to achieve, and so I stuck with it. They were very helpful on the side of like small adjustments to my schedule and like reminders about what things are important in life and what things don't matter. So I get very stressed out very easily, and that's something that comes with high academic rigor and you're working at a certain level where things are very tough, right? You have a lot of work, you have a lot of things going on. So my parents were like, oh, are you praying 5 times a day? Are you exercising? Are you talking to your friends? Like that kind of thing, but also making sure that I was never behind on my schoolwork. So it was never like they had to, sit down and control me while I was doing my homework. It was never like that because I wanted to do it. But at the same time, it's about taking their wisdom and reminding me, okay, you need to have balance and you need to make sure that the other parts of your life are also taken care of. And like, that's something that I sort of carry with me every day. And that's something that's very important for me is finding balance. I talk about that a lot. It's a process where like it doesn't come easily, but with time you sort of figure it out. So for me, that looks like, I exercise however many times a week and I turn off my computer at a certain time and say, okay, whatever doesn't get done, I'll figure it out tomorrow. And making sure that I rest and I'm taking care of myself and, spending time with my family, that kind of thing. So their role was making sure I stayed grounded and centered when I was going through those early stages, especially in sort of figuring everything out. And in terms of like practical, like prepping for the SAT or the ACT or AP exams, so like I mentioned, my school had AP exams and they cover the cost for those tests. Not every school is like that, but my school was like that. In terms of preparing, this is the same advice I'll give about the SAT in a second, but giving yourself as much time as possible. So I know a lot of people say they work well under pressure and they leave studying off to the last minute. That doesn't work for me. I need to give myself as much time as possible to review everything. And I'm a very detail-oriented person. And I think that every like small piece that could potentially help me, I want to review and I want to make sure that I have the time to look at that and really internalize that information. So like my best piece of advice is like making sure you make the time, dedicated study time to like focusing on the major things that you need to be working at. So with the SAT, I took that exam in my freshman year of high school. So I took it early. And the reason why I did that was because I knew that if I waited to take it later on in high school, it would coincide with other big exams that I was taking. So my freshman year, they like didn't let us take any AP exams. So I didn't have to study for AP exams. I knew that. So I was like, okay, this is sort of the last time I have where like I have unstructured study time to review for an exam that I need. And you sort of taking that opportunity to make sure that I used every possible moment. So I took the exam my freshman year. And then basically that gave me time later on to take like subject tests to improve my application. So the SAT, the College Board that makes that exam, they also make subject tests within like chemistry, English, math, whatever, biology. I basically took all of them from what I can remember. I was taking exams all the time. And that every small thing like that helps with your application because it shows your passion and your dedication to your studies and sort of that you're competent in all these different disciplines and that for that reason you make a more competitive applicant basically. Okay, I got a question. Hold on really quickly. So in terms of the number of AP classes, so I would say like it really depends on the person how many classes you should take. So I was able to handle the workload of taking, I think like 5 or 6 AP classes a year. And for some people that becomes too much. I will say though that like it helps also when you apply to college, if you have AP exam scores that are like, you have solid AP exam scores, you can get college course credit for it. And you'll end up paying less for college tuition because you can take fewer course credits in college and basically complete your degree faster. In terms of like, I think it's all about, like I said, balance. So like, you know yourself better than I do. And based on your own judgment saying like, okay, I know that I can only work for this many hours in one day, and that will only let me complete the course load for this many courses. And it really depends on like the learning style as well, because the AP courses are very specifically taught. So they have a specific set of curriculum, like curriculum objectives that essentially the AP teachers teach to that curriculum. They teach so that you do well on the test. So it's not like a normal classroom style. It's like you're being taught to take a test at the end of the year. You're not being taught to learn things necessarily. You're being taught to take a test. So for some people that doesn't work. And for some people that means that, you know, they're not getting anything out of taking that course. And at that point, it's not beneficial to anybody if you take a course that you're not benefiting from, right? So it really depends on the person. So, and I would also say that in terms of college applications, they do only compare you to people within your own high school. So like if other people apply to your institution, like when I applied to Harvard, they're comparing me to other people from McLean High School. So the fact that, you know, I took X amount of AP classes or my SAT score was whatever, that doesn't matter to somebody who went to a boarding school in Florida, right? My score has nothing to do with them. But in comparison to other people at my school, you know, there's a certain level of interconnectedness that it allows them to compare the two applicants essentially.
So, sorry for the interruption. So
no, you're fine.
Can we, like, you can go ahead and continue with your speech, and we will answer these questions at the end of the speech. So like, you talk about whatever you prepared.
Yeah. And okay, so for the other questions that I got, so learning tools that helped me prepare. When I was in middle school, Khan Academy wasn't really a thing at that point. Like I didn't know about it. And it wasn't until I got into my later phase of high school that sort of blew up and sort of started taking over the academic space. I didn't really have outside resources. I focused primarily on like whatever the course textbook was. And it was like, I was reading textbooks cover to cover. And like I said, I'm a very detailed oriented person. So it's not, you know, it's not necessary to read a textbook from cover to cover, but I really didn't rely on outside resources. It was more just looking at the course material already given to me and preparing from that. For extracurriculars in high school, so like I said, in middle school, I didn't really participate in much. I was kind of just doing my homework and preparing for high school. When I got to high school, though, it's sort of when my extracurriculars expanded. So I was on the varsity track team. That was like the main time suck, basically, outside of school for me. Outside of homework and projects and stuff, the main thing I was spending time on was I was at track practice. I was also on the Science Olympiad team, and we had a varsity math team that I was also a part of. So I was traveling for competitions with them on the weekends as well, and making time to balance everything that I had going on. I was also the president of the International Cultures Club, basically like a multicultural organization. And for a school where I was at that was predominantly white people, there was very few people in this club, but we put on an international night. We had food drive fundraisers. We did all kinds of stuff that like gave back to the community. And I think like we really established a strong presence on campus. Okay. And then outside of that, basically, I was preparing for exams and things like that. So that was sort of like the major things that I did in terms of clubs that I think like helped me with my application. So the summer before my senior year of high school, I founded a nonprofit with another Uyghur girl called the Northern Virginia Uyghur Youth Organization. It was small at the time, but basically what we did was the aim was to educate people outside of our own community and using our resources to further expand the awareness of like the Uyghur situation. And we also hosted like social events for young Uyghurs like in the area to make sure that we had a strong sense of community. Because essentially what we saw happening was, newly arrived Uyghur immigrants were sort of standing in one corner of the room, and the Uyghurs who were born here in the States, our Uyghur is not great, and our cultural experience is very different growing up here, that like we never interacted with each other. It was sort of like an unbreakable barrier between the two groups. And the main reason for that organization, the social aspect, was to bridge that gap. And it worked very well. And, that was this huge success for us. And then also like hosting events at like public libraries and bringing like people from the community out to really understand, okay, there are people here who have this very strong cultural sense and cultural knowledge that want to share that with us. And we should, take the time to listen to them. So like that was back in the early stages of current, political awareness of the situation. It's gotten much more widespread now, thankfully. But at that stage, it was still like, if you mentioned Uyghurs to anybody, like they would have no clue what you were talking about. So like from that early stage, we had that investment in the community and wanting to sort of expand knowledge surrounding that. So I wrote a lot about that on my college application. I think having that strong sense of like personal responsibility helped me a lot in terms of my application. Now moving on to college, I attended Harvard. When I got there, I didn't know what to expect, basically, because it's one of those things where you don't know anybody when you first get there, and it's a big campus and there's a lot going on, and you sort of have this sense of like, there's a lot of opportunity here and I don't know where to start. And I will say that the one thing I really did enjoy about my 4 years there was like all of the people that I had the opportunity to meet. So Harvard has a large international student population, but they also have people from so many different backgrounds that they attract and they recruit to the campus as people who bring something to the community that will better the education of everyone else around them. So there's a reason why like they bring a certain student in who has a unique background. They can share their experiences with other people and expand sort of the imagination of the others around them, essentially. So like I would say that by far the best thing about Harvard was the people. That sounds very corny when I say it like that, but that's definitely true. I also really liked, so Harvard has a unique residential system. I'll go over it very briefly, but basically after your first year, you get sorted into a house. It's kind of like Harry Potter, where they put you in a house based on, your demographics, affiliations, things like that. And in that house, you meet people outside of your major, outside of your academic year, outside of your own background. And that was like how I met so many different people who were studying all kinds of amazing things that I didn't even know existed. And so like, again, it circles back to the people, but the residential system at Harvard is also great. In terms of the cost and tuition, so they're notoriously expensive, undergraduate tuition, but I will say that Harvard, as the world's richest university, has very generous financial aid. Most of the people that I knew had some sort of like, at least 75% of their tuition was covered by the school. So they have like a financial aid calculator on their website that's very accurate. So I would say look at that as a resource. But if you make under like 75,000, I believe it is, in a combined family household income, then they're going to completely cover your tuition and basically pay you to go to school there. You get like a stipend to go to school there. So in most cases, like 95% of cases, going to Harvard is actually cheaper for people than going to state school because of the financial aid. So I would say that, look at that resource on their website. that's like a very helpful tool to calculate the cost of attending. And like, I think most people graduate from Harvard without significant loans. So most people I know have like a maximum probably of like $5,000 or $10,000 from the school, which is nothing compared to the $75,000 tuition they're charging you every year. So, you know, they're good about giving their students financial aid. They have the money to do it, so they owe them at least that much. But they do that so they can recruit, you know, high potential students to their campus, and students who will contribute something unique to their culture. And in terms of advice, just in terms of like generally in planning for college, I would say that like start planning early is one thing. And I would say trust your intuition about what you want to do later on, and also about like what school seems like the right fit for you. It's really hard to get a sense of what school is going to be like once you get there, but like you can get sort of some first generalizations or general appeal of the school just based on like people you talk to, their websites, if you're emailing like admissions directors, things like that. Because these are people on websites that the school has built to attract people to them. So in serving that purpose, it's sort of giving you a glimpse about who they are, and what the campus is like. So I would say like, you know, start thinking about it early, but also at the same time, like starting early will keep you less stressed later on. So we're all about minimizing stress on that application front. But starting early and then trusting your own intuition, I'd say, is the main two things. I want to pass it over to.
Sure. Thank you so much. It was
course.
really helpful and informative. So now we will give our time to Nigare.
Yeah, so men Nigara, but I was having some technical difficulties before, so I think the name under my photo says Nizam bin Japar. But yeah, so Nigara. So I guess just to start talking a little bit about myself right now. I do go to MIT, and I'm currently about to be a rising sophomore there. Because of the coronavirus, I had to come home a little early, so I've been home since around March, and it turns out next semester I'll still be home doing more online classes, maybe like some of you out there. And so yeah, I probably won't be back to college until maybe around like February-ish. But it's nice to be home for a little bit. As for my current major, I decided to do chemical engineering about a couple months ago. And some reasons for this is one, it's very cool to see how things are created, how like everything around us is made. And also it's like how you see like slime being made and Play-Doh being made since like you were really young. I think that's what kind of drove me into chemical engineering. Yeah, so, but then I don't know, even like till this point, like till this day, it's not like I've decided anything for certain as if like what career path I want to go to, but I'm definitely still exploring. So I'm currently like working with a professor right now, looking at like data stuff for coronavirus, which has been pretty cool. But yeah, so no way do you have to decide a particular career path very early on, because for me, I'm still personally going through deciding. But I guess to go back in time a little bit and discuss how I truly got here. And so I guess starting off from middle school, I did a pretty good amount of activities. So I've been playing piano since I was 6. And so even throughout middle school, I did lessons, recitals, competitions with piano, and I truly enjoy it. Like even to this day, I'll go over to my piano, which is like right over there, and play some songs. And then, yeah, also I actually started playing tennis once I got into middle school. And so I started taking lessons, and then from that point on, I actually joined my middle school tennis team. And then funny enough, I also joined the band in middle school. And so I played not only the trumpet, but then I also played the mini tuba, which is a very interesting choice now looking back at it. But at least I got the chance to explore, and that I still don't do any of the band stuff. Like even throughout high school, I stopped it there, but it was definitely a good experience and it let me explore. And yeah, so I think specifically for middle school academics wise, I was pretty, I guess, academically well-rounded at that point, in like kind of relating to the fact that I would always do my homework, I would always like study for tests. But I would say middle school wise, it's good to like develop those habits. But I would say that, yeah, so at that point, the good thing is you can like still explore, test yourself like with classes, but in no need do you have to like focus on getting maybe like 100 on every test or like acing every test whatsoever. But the one good decision I did make in middle school, which I'm very happy about, is so my middle school in particular at that time, they decided to allow some of us to take high school classes a little early on. Because so the middle school was on like one side of the parking lot and the high school was like on the other. So like very good connection between the two. And so I would say, yeah, the best decision I made during middle school was taking my one high school class, which was in Spanish. And so I think that definitely helped me like try to study and try to truly understand what high school classes were like and how I could like adjust to it. One thing I didn't realize though at that point, which I would have like to realize, was those classes also like count towards your GPA. So if you do choose to do a high school class in middle school, you might want to pay attention to the fact that it contributes to your GPA later on, but it didn't like hurt me that much, I guess. And so, yeah, and so from there, I like walked across the parking lot to my high school. And so my high school is a public high school in Georgia. And so in total, there's about 2,000 people in that high school, so about 500 for each grade. So it's still pretty a pretty good amount of people there. And so I would say when I first entered high school, I was definitely a shy person. Like I was the person who would like never ask questions in class. If I did go to class and I did know the answer, I would never raise my hand or shout out the answer. Luckily for me, those like changed over time as I grew older. But yeah, definitely I would suggest always like try to be one of the loudest ones in the classroom, always ask questions, because that would definitely benefit you the most. And then once I got into high school, I was at the point where I was like, well, what do I do basically? So there's a lot of classes to choose from and a lot of options. But I think for me in particular, I tried to choose classes that were at a good level for me, but then also in a way challenged me in some aspects. So I also came from like an AP style high school. So I was very fortunate to be able to take one AP class my freshman year in a subject called like human geography. And I think that also helped me greatly as I progressed through high school, because taking one AP class in particular allowed me to test in particular like what I needed to do in those sort of classes. But then it also helped me to see like if it was too hard or if I could handle it. And so, yeah, so I did that. And by the end of freshman year, I think I ended with a pretty good amount of confidence in those classes. Yeah, so I went on from there to taking like 3 a year, and then by like my junior, senior year, I took like 5 AP classes per year. I'm not recommending that you particularly do that because it does get a little stressful, but at least in my situation, I really enjoyed the classes I took. And definitely if you enjoy the classes you take, you most likely will gain a higher grade in those. So for me, I'm always the math and science person. So like chemistry, physics, calculus, those were my good subjects. Writing and history, those are not that great, but I still push myself to take them. But yeah, so definitely worth it in the end though. And so one of the great things about AP classes is definitely the AP tests and then the chances they provide you. So I actually took AP tests for all 14 of my classes. And so I wouldn't say I necessarily made like the greatest grades or the highest grades on like every single one of them, but I did do kind of good on some of them where my college, which is MIT, accepted those credits, which gives me space to not only get the option to maybe get a double major, get a minor, or probably like graduate early if I wanted to do that. And so, yeah, not all high schools do offer AP classes or that amount of them. But if you do have the opportunity to take it, I would highly recommend it because it provided a great benefit to me. Yeah, and as Gulenay Adele was saying, GPA and like academics, because you're in high school, is very important. So yeah, so it's very important. My GPA was out of a 4-point scale. I know some other people's differ, but I would say in regards to GPA, definitely take a course load which you feel comfortable in. Don't try to overbear yourself or take on more than you can handle. And as I said before, definitely take classes where you really want to take those classes. If it's not only to learn or if it's like subjects you're interested in, because you will most likely gain higher grades in those classes just because you're interested in them, as opposed to a class that you're maybe not so much interested in. And then although school is for school and although GPA is important, I would very, very much suggest you go on with your extracurriculars. Like, so I continue with tennis all throughout 4 years of high school. And so definitely that takes up a good majority of your time. Because I remember some nights I would go to a tennis match that was 2 hours away, and then I'll come back home at like 10 p.m. from those tennis matches. And that was for like weeks at a time. But looking back at it, it was one of the best decisions I made through high school, because I not only like love tennis, but it did provide me a good break from, I guess, the academic side of things, but it still allowed me to maintain a good balance between the two. And then like, in addition to that, I still played piano. I wasn't in the band anymore just because I felt like all of those together would have taken way too much of my time. So I did drop playing the mini tuba and the trumpet. But looking back at it, yeah, so those weren't like my main interests, so that was a good choice. And then other activities I did from there, I joined many clubs. So I did join like National Honor Society, which is like a club you get into if you make good grades, or at least it's like that in Georgia. I also did a lot of volunteer clubs. Then I was part of a club that like during the summer, I went to camp and taught second graders and third graders about like science. And we did like little experiments with the kids. So that was always a good time. And then also I would say another good thing I did like during my high school time was definitely like continue studying. So not like as intense like during the school year, but I definitely, at least starting from the summer before my junior year, I studied for the SAT. And I think, yeah, so what led me to this was, so the PSAT in Georgia is given out in 10th grade. And yeah, so in Georgia at least, so if you take it in 10th grade and then you score good enough, you're asked to take it again in 11th grade. And then if you score good on it in 11th grade, you can then get possibly a scholarship or like state recognition for your scores. And so I did that. And then I think taking the PSAT kind of like switched some gears on and made something click in my head where I was like, oh, I actually have to study for the SAT. And so the way I studied was I didn't go to like any class in particular. I just got a lot of books on Amazon. And I think every weekend I took like one practice test. And so I think I took over like 20 practice tests at some point, which seems like a lot, but over time when I spaced it out, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, so I took a lot of practice tests. And then I actually took the SAT twice, one in December of my junior year, and then one June, after the December, I took it in June. And so first time, yeah, so if you can't guess, I'm a very math and science person. Those are my strong suits. So first time, definitely math and science were definitely my high points. So not so much reading and writing. And so the second time I took it, I really just practiced reading and writing a lot. And so I ended up getting that score higher, which is a good thing. So I only took it twice. There's some people who take it 3 times, 4 times. I would suggest if the SAT is still around, because it may not be in the next couple of years, definitely around like 2 or 3 times is a good choice. And then the ACT is also a good option. I didn't take it personally, but I would say the ACT is more for people who are more like adjusted to reading and writing and can do that at a fast pace. Meanwhile, the SAT for me was more math related, so I particularly liked that test. And so after all of that, after basically 3 years of that, then was time to like start applying for colleges. And so I started applying for colleges and I was like, wow, I have like a lot of essays to write. And I was like, and me being, I'm not really like essay writing person. Like, what do I write about? Like, what did I do these last couple of years that like was exciting? Like, why would they want me? And so from there, definitely, I would highly suggest when this like point comes in time, ask family members, ask everyone you know around you for advice, because that's very helpful. I basically had my brother read all of my essays and asked him for a lot of advice that at some point he probably got annoyed with me. Yeah, so did that. And then for me, I applied to 9 colleges in total. So I kind of divided into levels, so like 2 safe schools, 3 schools that I considered were kind of like in the middle tier for me, and then 3 schools I was like, there's not much of a chance that I get in, but why not try and see what happens? And so one of the main reasons for all of that is because colleges have like so many different personalities. And so they're looking for certain things within each person that you just might not mesh with. So even if your academics are at their point, they still might not accept you for multiple reasons. Because I think the best way somebody described it to me is college application is actually kind of like a lottery system in a way. Just because they're just looking for different people who they think will contribute to their community. And so when it comes to my essays, I think I tried to focus on what made me different compared to everyone else. So maybe it wasn't just like solely academics, but you do very much need the academics for them to even consider you. But then after that, what sports did you do? What extracurriculars did you do? Yeah, so I had a friend, actually, very funny enough. So she wasn't like an artist who considered herself like very good or professional. But what she did was she got her artwork that she did from like multiple different years, like when she was like 5 to the point where she was 18, and she submitted that. And from that, I think college people were very impressed. So it's nothing that you have to do that's so very creative or so very big, but you definitely do have to like stand out in the process. And then, yeah, another very good recommendation I got from people was do try to get close to your teachers. Because when it comes to the college process, at the end, you're also going to need them to give a recommendation for you, whether it's 1 or 2 teachers. So if at some point those 1 or 2 teachers that you know very well, and they write like an amazing recommendation letter for you to get into college, that's very, very helpful. And that can make the difference between possibly you getting into one college or not. Yeah, and then also there's a lot of pretty cool scholarships out there. So like at a certain point in time, in addition to all this like college application, there's also like scholarships you can apply to. Some are more, I guess, economic related, while others are like, if you're left-handed, I think there's a scholarship for being left-handed, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I guess looking back at it now and considering what advice I would give after all this time is, 1, it's easy to become very stressed in high school just because you're maybe like doing a lot, you're participating a lot, but I would still try to enjoy it as much as you can. Maybe particularly don't go for the clubs or sports or activities you think are gonna certainly like get you into college, but definitely go for the ones you also like very much enjoy. Excuse me. Yeah, so that you also very much enjoy. Also, don't feel like at this point in time you have to like plan out your future whatsoever. Like, I think within the last couple months, I've changed what I wanted to do about like 10 different times. So don't think you have to decide your path right now. Don't think in any way that you have to decide a career right now. It is a good idea to like maybe have like some ideas in mind and maybe try to like explore those, but yeah, don't really stress over that too much. Always ask for advice. Yeah, so you can basically contact me anytime if you want, if you have like a homework question, or if you just want some advice on maybe like college stuff later in the future. But yeah, so I'm always open to that. And so I guess that was just a little bit about me and my past with all of this, and I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much, Nigara. It was really detailed and helpful and inspiring as well. Now, like, if anyone has a question, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Otherwise, I will read the questions from our chat. I guess we will start answering the question from our chat and then wait if somebody has a question later on. Otherwise, so and our first, I think Gulenay answered our first question, second question. So our third question was, how much effort are we supposed to put on after class activities? And in other words, how much effort does after class activities have when you compare to academics when you apply for college? Gulenay, did you want to answer that question?
Yeah. So obviously academics are like the most important thing. So like to get your foot in the door, your academics have to be there, basically. Like your GPA has to be strong enough to start a conversation with the school. Like we've said though, like when you're comparing to people who have very strong GPAs, who have strong exam scores, that's where extracurriculars and your letters of recommendation start to make a difference. So like the fact that you're able to balance responsibilities for different clubs, and the fact that you're also able to maintain good relationships with your teachers, and the fact that you're able to like express yourself eloquently in your essays, like all of that stuff only really matters like once you get past, like once you get your foot in the door, basically. So I would say like academics are obviously like the central part of your application because you have 4 years worth of records, basically. So you're submitting to them, here is 4 years of my history and how I study. And so like if your academics aren't there, then like you can forget about having the conversation at all. But like from there, the extracurriculars are like make a marginal difference essentially. So like if you have two people with the same scores, then like then they become important. So prioritize according to that, basically.
Thank you. The next question was, what was your motivation to get 14 AP classes? Nigara, did you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I can answer that. I guess the number 14 is, at first it comes like a lot. I really like the AP classes. I think one, because it challenged me more than basic classes, and I think out of everything I was definitely looking for a challenge. Also, the subjects were pretty interesting, like psychology, world history, especially for me, calculus, physics. Yeah, and then I guess just going down later on, I didn't get like all 5s on my AP exams. I think I actually got, it was like a range of scores. I did get like a couple of 3s, a couple of 4s. So I think maybe out of all of those, I got 6 or 7 5s, and then the rest weren't 5s. So definitely they're not looking for perfection or anything. You don't have to strive for like perfect grades on all the tests, because in reality, the tests are hard. But I think the thing that I most liked about the AP classes were they definitely prepared me for college life. I definitely walked into classes more confident than I've ever been because I knew I had a very good AP background. So I think out of everything, maybe that's what's motivated me, was not like the grades or like, oh, the fact that they're AP, but I could like learn more from them.
Okay. I guess next question was...
Can I add one thing to that really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
In terms of getting 5 on the AP exams, I didn't get a 5 on like the majority of mine. I would say do not worry, because I ended up working out. Like I do not, if you don't get a 5, don't be crushed. They make it very hard to get a 5 for a good reason. And it really depends on what school. For Harvard, they don't count any AP exams anyway. So it doesn't matter, basically. If you don't get a 5, try your best. And in the case that it can help you earn credit, that's fantastic. But like, that's not by no means like something that should crush your spirits at all. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. So next question is like, actually you answered half of it. Like it says, what's your SAT score? And do you need to get all 5? You already answered that.
My SAT score, really quickly, yeah. I took it when, so there was like 3 mandatory sections. I took it a long time ago, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So they've changed it a lot since I took it. But the maximum score when I took it was a 2400, and I think I got a 2300 on the SAT. So I got a perfect score in the critical reading section. And and then I got 750 and 750 in math and then in writing. So like I know it's changed a lot since then, and now like the writing section isn't mandatory. I would say though, like look at the schools you're interested in. Some of them like do strongly recommend it, which basically means take it. So yeah.
Thank you. Nigara, you wanna?
Yes. So for me, I took mine where the full score was out of 1600, so a different style of test. I actually got a 1530 out of 1600. So like no way do you need to get like a perfect score or whatever to like get into these colleges. So for me, my math was a 790 out of 800, and my reading and writing was a 750 out of 800. Yep.
Okay. Your next question was, what advice do you have for rising college freshmen? You got it. I think you can give.
Yeah, so I actually just finished my freshman year, and honestly, so college is, I know people say like college is like one of the best like years of your life, and in my experience, that was very true. I guess with the coronavirus situation, I don't know if it's currently like online classes or if it's like in-person classes, but definitely there's a lot of resources to like help you through. College people, so I would say my favorite part of MIT was not the academics, but generally like the people. So once you go to college, the people are hands down the nicest you've ever met. And so I would say when it comes to academics wise, you'll eventually get used to it. There may be some challenges. Like I think the first exam I took when I went to college, I made like a 40 something on, which not exactly the greatest moment, but I feel like many people have those experiences where they don't get the highest grade immediately, but in the end you learn from it and it doesn't really affect you as much. So no matter what, I would say keep going with what you're doing because it got you to that point, but also I wouldn't stress about it too much because you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Our next question is, at which point in your life did you find a good balance between the social and emotional aspects and academic aspects? I think Gulenay can answer.
Yeah, so it took me a while once I got to college to adjust. Moving so far away from home and like not knowing anybody really when I got there was really tough. I think I sort of figured it out my sophomore year. So freshman year, you're still meeting people, making friends, figuring out like, okay, what extracurriculars am I interested in? You know, once you figure out like, okay, you get a better sense of what your major is, whatever, that kind of thing. So it took me until my sophomore year when I like declared my major and I knew who like my solid friend group was, and I knew what my extracurriculars were, that like I felt like I was stable and balanced in that sense. Because up until that point, like I would say freshman year is really for exploring, and because you have so much time, right? And there's so much opportunity at that point that like that's sort of the time to take advantage of all the different possibilities on campus. And I think from there, like you slowly start to settle a little bit, but like freshman year is very tumultuous. That's the best word I can think to describe it, just because like you're being thrown into a completely new space and navigating it can seem like very daunting, but just know it'll work out. Just have faith that it'll work out.
Thank you. Next question was, how can parents help your child's education? So like, how did your parents help with your study and life, etc.? I think Gulenay went over about it a little bit. Maybe Nigare can talk about it.
Yeah, so definitely my parents did support me a great deal throughout high school. I guess not in the aspect of like they're helping me with my homework, but definitely the support of like, and definitely like, I guess not necessarily like push me to do stuff, but definitely saying, oh, you can do more than this. You shouldn't strive for maybe like a state college. You can actually like go to MIT. So I think looking back at it, that support was definitely very helpful. Yeah, and also just like, not only like making sure, I guess academics wise, things are going the way they should, kind of like double checking, oh, do you remember you have like a test that's coming up? Do you want to study for that? But also just like the daily like driving from like practice to practice, from lesson, those are all very helpful. And I think that's what got me to where I am today, basically.
Our next question is there any classes in particular that would increase your chances for getting into MIT? Question is for Nigara again.
So I would say MIT wise, since it is a very tech school, a lot of science and math classes definitely show good. But also MIT, even though it is notoriously like a sciencey, mathy school, there's a lot of like vast different majors. So even if you were into like history and writing, MIT would still have a place for you. Definitely most MIT students are more have like higher grades in relation to math and science, but there's no like particular classes that you need to focus on to get into MIT, but do need to have a pretty good math and science level.
Thank you. Next question is, what college did you apply to, and what was your number one college you wanted to get into? Gulenay.
So I applied to 5 colleges total. So 3 of those were like a guaranteed admission program. Basically, you enroll as an undergrad, and essentially, if you maintain a certain grade point average, they'll take you for that school's medical school. I didn't get into any of those programs, primarily because I really didn't have like a strong volunteer record, I think, to show for it. To be fair though, like it is very hard to get into a hospital when you're like 15 years old, and like most people don't want to take that risk. It's a liability. So like, you know, I wasn't too upset about it. It was kind of just, you just go with it. And then I applied to UVA, which is our state school, and then to Harvard. And I applied to all of those schools early because all the applications were due early. And with Harvard, I don't know what it is with MIT, how it is there, but we have like early action, we don't have early decision. So there's a distinction between those two. So early action is like non-binding and early decision is binding. So like if they take you for early decision, like you're basically signing away your life and saying, if you take me, I'm going 100%, right? Doesn't matter what you charge me, doesn't matter, you know, whatever, I'm going. And then early action, which is Harvard's system, basically is like you apply to them early and know that I'm very interested in your school. But they do have like certain requirements, but it's not binding. So they can say, oh, you can apply to us early, but you can't apply to any other private institution. So that's basically who they're competing with, like other Ivy League schools. So I was like, that's fine. You know, I'm not really interested in any other Ivy League, so I'm just going to apply to Harvard and go just do that route. And then I was allowed to apply to UVA early as well. I ended up getting into both Harvard and UVA basically like within a few days of each other. I was kind of torn because like I wanted to be close to home and like around my parents and things like that, but it ended up going to Harvard. So, you know, it really depends on like your own personal, like what you want in terms of an academic environment, proximity to your family, things like that. So not everything is important. Just like don't take anything else for granted. Yeah.
Okay, Nigara, do you want to answer this question too?
Yeah, definitely. Funny story with this. So out of the 9 colleges I applied, I thought I would never go to MIT. To me, I just didn't think, one, that they would accept me. And then I didn't think that, I don't know, that I would particularly like want to go there because I've never really been to the Northeast. I would say my number 1 college in particular was Stanford, and possibly like my brother went to Vanderbilt. So I thought, oh, maybe I should try to apply to Vanderbilt. Funny thing, got waitlisted. So I was like, I guess like that's not very much like in my plans so far. But yeah, so MIT was definitely not my number 1, but very happy to go there now.
And like there's another question, that was it hard to get into MIT?
Difficulty wise, was it hard? I don't know. I guess I also applied to like Princeton and Cornell and different schools like that and didn't necessarily get accepted. So I don't know what necessarily made MIT accept me over those other schools. Definitely, it does take hard work, but also like a mix of like fun activities to get into MIT. Yeah, so I would say it's hard to get into any college, whether it's like MIT, Harvard. Yeah, but it kind of like I said, it's like a lottery system. So I don't know if particularly MIT would be harder than other schools, but definitely not the easiest thing to get into, but it's like definitely apply to all schools, even if you think they're unreachable, because there's a high chance you might actually get in.
Yeah, and Pezlaka also talked about it at the beginning, and the other question was to be a parent, we don't know about the USA education system and what kind of help should we provide our kids in middle school and high school.
I can jump in really quickly. Just going back to the last question though, really briefly, like she said, it's a lot of the admissions process is like, it feels random. And I say this to everybody, but like, you never know how your admissions thing is going to turn out. Like it could be like the lowest level of like school or something, and they may not take you because it's just random like that. It's a lottery system. So there are times when that happens where like somebody is qualified for something and they don't get it. And it's just, that's just part of the process, the application process here. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense, but you kind of just have to go with it. In terms of support from the parents, we said this earlier, but like really just giving your child every opportunity to like engage their interests. So like sometimes that's hard with like if people are working full time. So for us, like for me, it was like knowing I had a ride to get home after school. If I wanted to stay for a club meeting, I could stay, and I knew that somebody was there to pick me up to take me home. Granted, I would like wait in school sometimes until like 6 or 7 o'clock, but I knew somebody was coming, so I didn't have to, you know, hold myself back from my interests. So like being available to support your kids outside of strict academic work, and saying like, oh, if you're interested in going to the robotics club meeting, then go, and I will figure out a way to get you back here. And like my parents were cooking dinners for me, were, you know, staying quiet on the weekends in case I wanted to sleep in, like that kind of thing, right? It's like small stuff that you take for granted that doesn't really feel like you're doing anything, but it adds up.
Okay. Our next question is, what kind of essay topics do you recommend writing? Nigara, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I'd say, at least from my personal experience, the essay topics I wrote over were definitely, being Uyghur is definitely something, I guess, in these times, and it's definitely something in the US that very much stands out. And so I wrote a good amount of my essays, not only on like being Uyghur, but also like being born in Japan, having that side of me, while also growing up in a small Georgia city and having my like diverse experience. I also wrote some of my essays on like extracurriculars, like my tennis, me like wrangling like 20 like 5-year-olds in like a camp, trying to teach them about science and stuff. So nothing like too out there, nothing too amazing, but some things that are like personal to me that I thought others would appreciate.
Yeah, Gulenay, did you want to answer this question too?
Yeah, so very similar. I wrote about a lot about my identity, and I continue to do this now because that's a very central part about like my experience in the world, is like how I identify and like what parts of my life seem important to me. So like for my admissions essay, I think I gave like a short story about my mom's childhood in Georgia, and like how she would walk like on dirt roads. I've shared this story before, but she would walk on dirt roads to get to school. And so like when it would rain, the roads would flood. And so she would like lose shoes, like her bags, like, you know, things like that. And then so I used that anecdote as sort of like an opening to say like, that experience is not far removed from who I am, right? This is my mother. It's very close to me. And there's very few people who live in the States who are applying to these like high level institutions who have stories to tell like that. And saying like, this is very central to who I am as a person, while also like recognizing that I was born in the States, right? I have an immense amount of privilege being born here because I don't have to, you know, I take a bus to school, there's cars, like whatever. I don't have to walk, you know, 10 miles to get to school. And so like recognizing that, you know, I have privilege and like using my voice, wanting to use my voice for something good. And like, that's kind of what I wrote about. And Harvard is always looking for people who are like wanting to bring new voices to their community. So I think like that's a very strong entry point, definitely.
Thank you. Thank Answer this question in your speech. Okay, what are some tips in constructing a compelling college essay? Gulenay, did you want to go?
Yeah, I would start with something that's like personal, so something that like you actually care about very deeply. The reason why I say that is because like the people who read your essays, this is what they do for a living, right? Like that is their full-time job, is being an admissions counselor. So they can tell very easily whether something is genuine or not. So like don't write about sports if you don't care about sports. Don't write about I don't know, playing piano if you don't care about playing piano, right? Like say something that's very genuine to who you are as a person. And like that genuine like character of that comes across in like the words that you use to describe things, like the sentence structure, everything. So like it becomes inherent in the structure of the way that you write your essay. So I would say like to start, pick something that like you actually care about and want to talk about with other people, because when you go for an interview, they're going to ask you, why did you write about this? Or tell me more about this experience. And if you have nothing to say, then it's like very obvious to them at that point that you're kind of just saying things that you think they want to hear. So just pick something that you care about.
Thank you. Our next question is from Rahmatul Murad. Hello, I just graduated from biology department in university in Turkey, and I want to do my master's degree in USA, but my degree is not perfect as well. Because of some classes, I'm not interested, but I'm also have a good grade on genetics, biochemistry, and another classes. Does this make trouble when I register the school?
Yeah, I would say like it doesn't necessarily have to be a perfect match. So I'm only speaking from my experience, like going to medical school. I suck at chemistry. I'm very bad at it. And it's actually kind of embarrassing how bad I am at chemistry. But like in organic chemistry, for example, I've shared this story also, but like this on average for our exams, people were scoring like 47%, I think was the average for all of our exams. Some people were way below that. Sometimes I was below that. Sometimes I was above it. But like, you know, people struggle with, you know, certain topics and they're better at some and they're not as good at others, right? That's natural. And I think like recognizing those weaknesses is like the most important thing in saying like, okay, if this topic comes up, then I know I need to dedicate more time to it. But I would say like not to be too concerned about like the perfection of the match, because like I'm going to medical school, like I'm starting now, but I'm, you know, chemistry is not my strong suit. So I would say don't be overly concerned about it.
Yeah. Next question was what extracurricular you did and what's your passion? I think both of you talked about this already, and probably you answer what's your passion. This question. Nigara, did you want to jump onto this?
Passion-wise, I would say like more like the simple things, I would guess, like piano, tennis, like my hobbies. So like I still every week I go out, play a tennis game or two. One, because it's good exercise, and two, because it's very, very fun. So if you ever wanted to try tennis before, I would very highly recommend it. Also passion-wise, I feel like maybe this might be another reason why I got into MIT, but MIT's motto is to change the world, whether it's through like science or whether it's through like activism or social rights. So definitely me trying to put myself into that and then learning in order to possibly like change the world someday, which is very cool to think about.
Thanks. Gulenay, did you want to answer this question too?
Yeah, in terms of passion, like I said, like I kind of always knew that medicine was what I wanted to do, but like what specifically within medicine is like an important question. So for us, like in our community, I've seen a lot of value in preventative medicine, and culturally competent medicine. So like that means bridging the gap between like immigrant communities and like Western healthcare systems, right? And based on like historical trauma, like a lot of people don't trust the American medical system. And I think like I see a role for myself in bridging that trust and saying like, we're not all evil, right? Like there's a clear benefit to seeing your doctor regularly, to educating yourself about health. So I think like public health in general, and specifically like culturally competent medicine.
Okay. Still have some people getting in. Okay, next question was, is there such a thing as too much information in a college essay? Nigara, did you wanna?
Yeah, so most college essays do have a word limit. And so even if you want to write like a 50-page or how many page book, they will limit you to about 2 pages. And so I would say definitely within those 2 pages, don't try to like put in all the information that you have. Don't try to write everything that you did in high school, but focus on a few specific things. And with that, tell a story that will interest the person who's reading it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, okay, somebody asked, can I get a link if I listen again this event? So we will record it so you can watch it online. And like most of them are really most of them are just compliments. Okay, there is a philosophical question. Is it morally wrong to be driven by the desire to become wealthy? Okay, we will go to next question. Does it matter what high school you went when you apply for those top tier Ivy League colleges? I mean, is there a ranking system for high schools too? If yes, how much impact does it place on your college application? Gulenay answered this question earlier, but you can just briefly talk about it.
Yeah, so briefly what I said earlier was it doesn't matter what school you went to as long as within the context of your school, you're trying to challenge yourself. So like I said, like my public high school doesn't matter for somebody who went to, like they're not going to compare my grades and my achievements in my high school to somebody who went to a college prep academy somewhere, right? Like it's not fair to compare those two, so they don't do it. They have specific people who are specialists, like in your county or in your district, who know how your schools work. They have plenty of people who work for the admissions office, so don't worry. These people know your school very well. It's basically their job to understand, like, how does your grading system work? How does the curriculum work? What courses are available? That kind of thing. So it doesn't really matter. Like you can get into top tier schools from any high school as long as you're within that context, trying the hardest you can, right, and striving to be the best you can. Yeah.
Thank you. Our last question was, are you happy with your upbringing, with your language and culture, and what do you suggest to Uyghur parents move to the US? Like this should be like really for your parents, but you can answer this question. Gulenay.
Yeah, it was very important for me to have that sort of cultural awareness when I was growing up. I've spoken about this also, but it took me a while to understand fully what was going on and like why that was so important. And I think like that was just because I was young and ignorant, and I didn't really have a grasp of like cultural issues. I think like the main advice I always give to people is to like be patient with your kids and like have faith that like they are good people and that they will come around to sort of understanding why certain like cultural preservation is so important. So for me, like it happened when I was like 15, around that age. So I was already in high school before I really understood like, oh, I'm Uyghur, like what does that mean? And then from there, it became like a very strong like guiding force in my life. Like, okay, how do I navigate in school so that I can do well by my community? How do I when I go to college, how do I get involved in activism that does well for my community, that kind of thing. So I would say like it was very, very central to my upbringing and to like my success, definitely. And it's present every day in my life, definitely.
Thank you. We got one more question. Did the Uyghur culture background contribute to your achievements? Nigara, did you want to take this question?
Yeah, so I would say it definitely contributed a great deal to my achievements because it definitely serves like as a motivational factor throughout my whole life, knowing that I've been given the opportunity to go and do great things that, say, my parents weren't able to have, or people back in our homeland aren't able to be able to go and pursue. So definitely that's a huge motivating factor for me to strive and do my best. And also, it's undeniable that the Uyghur culture is so unique in the US, where it's definitely above everything else. It's definitely a contributing factor to any college that you apply to. It's not going to be like automatically you get in because you're Uyghur, but it's definitely something that's highly eye-catching.
Like I think her sound cut out. So I see the next question, so I'm just going to take it so we don't have to sit here awkwardly. Specialty of medicine I would like to go into. So when I was
Birisi ovozni echib oldi.
Yeah, Hayden, so we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. I'm just taking the next question about the specialty of medicine. So when I was younger, I wanted to do pediatrics. Now I'm thinking like either family medicine or adult internal medicine, but you never know, things change. So I'm going in with a plan to go into internal medicine, just be a general physician, but we'll see. That's the plan for right now.
Yeah, there's a lot more questions that have been written.
I have Hidensa has my email address. I can tell it to you right now if you want, but I can write. I'll just write it in the chat. So let me do that. I'm like more than happy to like read applications, read essays, give you advice or why I chose certain schools or whatever. I just send it in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So if you guys have any questions about that, please do let me know. I wish I had known more going into it than I did, but I'm always like more than happy to share my experience, definitely. I think we had two more in the chat, Hayden, so I don't know if you saw one of them is the support group for Uyghur students and parents, and the other one was, when did you actually start managing your time? You see those? Okay. Yeah, I see the support group one. there's not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if other people are working on that, but not that I'm aware of, no. And then the other question was about managing my time for myself without my parents' suggestion. I would say high school was when I was kind of like completely independent. Yeah.
So I would say for the first question about Uyghur support group, I did hear that there was an Uyghur youth organization started by Zulkayda Mehmet, but I don't know if that's still going on or if they're very involved at this point. And then I guess to answer the other question also, I think definitely like starting towards middle school, I started managing my time by myself. So not with like doing like a crazy planner schedule, but definitely like knowing how to get certain things done by a certain time. Yeah, so I think I just answered it, but
Ben bir iki kız xulası söz kılayım. Beşini ben başlap dikemme. Oldu bilen şu iki kızımızga nayet köp rahmet Gulenay, Nigare nayet puxta tayyorlab qilib, nayet atrofliq so'zlab berdilar. Menimcha şu bugun şu to'g'ri kirgan shuni anglash uchun o'ltirgan hammaylar o'zi kerak bo'lgan javoblarni oldi deb o'ylayman. Nayet'im bir ahamiyatlik bir paranglish bo'ldi. Hammaylarga nayet yaxshi bir tushlik tomoq bergan bo'ldinglar. Menimcha hammangizlar tushlik tomoq yemisizmi buguncha bo'ldi deb o'ylayman. Endi shu bugungi faoliyatninki bundaq ikki nuqtadan qarasak menimcha nayet yaxshi bo'ladi deb o'ylayman. Birsi shundaq bizning oliy maktablarda bo'libmi doktorlik oliy maktablarda o'qiyotgan shundaq oldingi o'rinda MIT, Harvard deymiz, Stanford deymiz, yana oldingi 10 yoki oldingi 20 ning ichida o'qiyotgan shundaq o'quvchilarni qadrlash. Shu o'quvchilarning o'qish tajribalarini anglash bu hammalar uchun intayin muhim. O'zaro fikr almashtirish bizningki bundan keyin o'rta maktabdan to'liqsizdan to'liq o'rtadan oliy maktabga o'rlab o'qiyotganlar uchun yo'lni qisqartirish rolni o'ynaydi. Yana birisi shu to'liqsiz to'liq o'rtada o'qiyotganlar uchun tajriba o'rganish faoliyati bo'ladi. Shunga bu faoliyat menimcha bugun shu tunji birinchi qatimliq bilan to'xtab qolmaydi. Bundan keyinmi biz yana boshqa oliy maktablarda o'qiyotgan bolalarni to'plab mushtaqlardan ishkidan ularning tajribalarini anglab chiqishni muvaffaq deb qarayman. Yoki har yili kelar yil bo'lamdi yoki shu bir yilda 5 qatimda bo'lamdi shu oldingi maktablarda o'qiyotganlar. Ayrimsa siz buni aytib yaxshi riyosatchilik qilib, yaxshi o'rlashtirdingiz, vaqtni birga ko'rib qolib sizga ko'p rahmat. Ammo aqida boshqaga abniz yoki boshqalarning fikri bo'lmasa, meningki tavsiyam hamda 1,5 soat maylamni charchidi. Bu ham ishga elan ko'p tayyorlik qilibdi, ko'p rahmat yana. Meningki qo'shib qo'ydiganim shu.